Welcome back to the Ed Morrissey Show podcast edition. Joining me as always on Thursdays, Duane Patterson of the Hugh Hewitt Show, master of the Universe, HUGHNIVERSE.com, the troll-free web surfing experience for Hugh Hewitt fans and listeners. Duane, lots of stuff going on this week, man.
Oh yeah, domestically and abroad, foreign policy. I mean, it's kind of a pick'em. You can go anywhere you want, spend our time together. But we got a lot to cover.
We do have a lot to cover. I think we'll start with the most recent developments in Ukraine, which is that Ukrainians are.
By the way,
yeah.
You introduced me. I want to say I am a male, and I can define what a male is.
That was going to be my first question, but I was just about to go to the other topic. But
okay,
Duane,
okay, that's fine.
No, that's fine. Let's start there. Duane, what is a woman?
A woman is one of the two scientific genders of Homo sapiens. A woman is the gender that has the chromosomal ability to reproduce.
Now,
bear children.
Okay. Where did you get your degree in biology, Duane? Because I am reliably informed by people with knowledge that you have to be a biologist to be able to define what a woman is.
Hey, you know what? I took high school biology. I dissected the frogs. I dissected the sharks. I know my way around biology.
You played doctor when you were a kid?
I played doctor a little bit when I was a kid. Yeah.
All right, Duane. So, Ketanji Brown Jackson. Marsha Blackbird set up this question. I mean, this is the first black woman to be named to the Supreme Court, right?
And Ted Cruz drove a Mack truck through that hole that Marsha Blackburn exploited, right? Look, why was Ketanji Brown Jackson nominated? What was the selling point by the White House of why she was picked? What was promised with the forthcoming nomination that ended up becoming Ketanji Brown Jackson?
Wasn't even
Joe Biden.
It was in fact, it was the only category from which he was going to choose a black woman. That was his pledge. A black woman.
That was his promise. He made it all the way through the campaign trail. This was a box that was checked off, a campaign promise that he made. His first pick was going to be a black woman. It is time for a black woman. So he chose a black woman. What month are we in the middle of? We are just coming off of what month last month, and then we're into what month this month? What is this month again?
Is it Women's History Month? And
Women's History Month
on the heels of Black History Month, I think.
I think that's the case.
But I guess we can define black because we've done that with Rachel Dolezal, right? I mean, we've.
Yeah, Rachel Dolezal is clearly what you are black if you feel black, unless of course you really aren't and you're appropriating, in which case you're kind of canceled. Even though she
was just ahead of her time, Duane. Rachel, I think it's Dolezal. It could be Dolezal, but I think it's pronounced Dolezal. I think whatever it was.
The Barcelona.
I think it's a Barcelona thing. Yes.
Pronunciation.
Well, it's what was it? Tears for Fears was Olafable, right? And he pronounces it Olafable.
Yes, that's it. Well, Roland Orthoball.
Orthoball, yeah.
Yes.
Orthoball, thank you.
Yes. No. Here's the thing. It is if Rachel Dolezal, if that's how we're going to pronounce her name, if her story was just now breaking, would she have the same result she had, whatever it was, 4, 5, 6 years ago?
I got to be honest with you, Duane. I'm not sure why she's not. Well, I'm not sure why she's coming out now and saying I've been vindicated. If you can't define woman, you can't define black, because truth doesn't matter. I mean, what really struck me about this, not that it's going to derail Jackson's nomination, right? I mean, we know this. She's going to get confirmed. This is going to have no impact on this.
Well, you see, here's the thing. She is going to get confirmed. But you know what? I guess Hugh and I, before the hearings, Hugh and I were much more generous on the ease of which this confirmation was going to go through. We figured it would be, Hugh thought originally the over-under was 65. I'm not sure it was that high. But
yeah, I saw that and I thought that was pretty generous. I was going to ask Hugh, which 15 Republicans do you think are going to vote for Jackson's confirmation?
Well, he thought Shelley Moore Capito might. He thought.
I mean, I think there was a chance to get maybe 5 or 6, but that was probably as much. I mean, I don't want to go through 15 names here, but I mean, yeah, we're down to Susan Collins and maybe Murkowski, right?
Collins. I think she lost Susan Collins.
Really?
I think she lost Susan Collins yesterday.
So now why did she lose Susan Collins?
Because with Susan Collins, process matters, and there's a lot of her answers yesterday that were really off-putting to Susan Collins. It wouldn't surprise me. I think it's down to Murkowski.
Murkowski's not going to vote for her. Murkowski's got to stand for election in Alaska.
Well, then if she's lost, see, I really think she's lost Collins. If you think she's lost Murkowski, the only other one that she even had a chance of grabbing was Mitt Romney, but she lost Mitt Romney because his Mormon sensibilities are over his political sensibilities.
Right.
And the defending child porn stuff, he's like,
yeah,
I can't do that.
Maybe I think it's 50 plus. I think it's 50 plus Kamala.
And if that's the case, okay, fine. But here's what the last 2 days to me have done. This has not been the Republicans' attempt to scuttle the nomination. I really don't think they've been going after her to scuttle her nomination. What they're doing is they are taking Virginia's election and applying it to this nomination so that the Democrats are going to be forced to take a vote on the successful branding the Republicans have done to her nomination. It's not that they're beating her up personally. Again, all this talk about from the left about how we're demonizing, the Republicans are demonizing her much more than the Democrats ever did to Brett Kavanaugh is absurd. I mean, it's just patently absurd.
They were accusing him of gang rape. I mean, give me a break.
They were accusing of gang rape. They were going through his college years, going through his high school yearbook, the boofing, the boof truthing, all that kind of stuff. That's absurd. What the Republicans are doing is they are looking at her judicial record as a job qualification for whether or not she deserves to be promoted to the next level of the judiciary. They're looking at her judicial record. They're looking at her sentencing. That to me seems to be okay. If we can't just say, what do you think about abortion? Nope, can't answer that. What do you think about immigration? Nope, can't answer that. If you can't ask her what her judicial philosophy is on the key important issues of the day, rightly so. If she's not going to answer those questions and you can't ask those questions, but she is a judge, okay, let's look at her judgeship. Let's look at what she's done while she was a judge. That seems to be in play as far as a job interview, does it not?
Well, it does, and they have done a pretty good job of doing that. To the point now where the White House supplied pre-sentencing reports to Democratic senators, but refused to provide them to Republicans.
Which is outrageous.
And I think that's part of the process issue that you might be talking about with Susan Collins.
With Susan Collins, because Susan Collins is looking at that going, hey, that ain't cool. I mean, Susan Collins is a lot of things, but she's been around that body a long time, and she knows what the standards are. And when you look at the White House doing a heavy hand, and you've got Dick Durbin as the committee chairman saying, nope, that's out of bounds. I'm not going to let you do that. I'm not going to let you expose all these child porn defendants. I'm not going to let you do that. That's a bridge too far for me. We're not going to do that. And Mike Lee is looking at him open face agape like, are you freaking kidding me?
Yeah.
We are doing something, the term unprecedented that's the most overused word in the history of the English language.
Unprecedented?
unprecedented since the days of Donald Trump. But what the Democrats are doing now to the Judiciary Committee is actually unprecedented. Withholding the pre-sentencing guidelines for just the minority, and shutting down lines of inquiry. It just doesn't happen. But we're doing it here because we got to jam this thing through. Dick Durbin is trying to stop the bleeding of this nomination, and the bleeding is because she can't answer a damn question.
Well, I would say that she was actually doing pretty well until it got into the evening session. That's kind of where things started falling apart for her a little bit. That's where the can you define a woman thing started, right?
She actually looked like she was wearing out.
Yeah, she was tiring out.
She looked like she was tiring out, and she let her guard down, and she wasn't thinking through her answers all the way.
Which begs the question, does it not? And I know that that's not the proper structure for begging the question, but it does at least prompt the question. Why did Democrats have a night session for this thing? Why not just stop it at 5 o'clock, come back, do an extra day? I mean, they're in charge of this. I mean, having your nominee sit up there for, what was it, like 9 hours?
10 hours, yeah.
I mean, why do that? Why do that to her? Especially when you're coming back and doing questions the next day. I mean, they came back yesterday and did more questions. They wrapped it up, I think, around noon.
These hearings actually are pretty grueling. They were grueling for Kavanaugh. They were grueling for Gorsuch. They went a long time.
I don't get why you set up that trap in the first place if you're in control of this. I would say 4 hours one day, 4 hours the next day, 4 hours a third day, and then we're done, rather than trying to squeeze it into 1.5 days of committee time. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. Anyway.
Yeah, she had 3 really bad moments this week. One was the I can't define what a woman is thing. And again,
no, it wasn't just that I can't define what a woman is, because that's actually sort of out of the progressive playbook. It was what she said in explaining that, because I'm not a biologist. And if it's a matter of biology, then it's very simple. Human biology has 2 sexes, just like most mammalian and even most non-mammalian.
So that is actually the same thing as saying, I'm a science denier. I'm not going to recognize what science says about it.
Right. You don't have to be a biologist to know that there's 2 human sexes. You don't have to even be a biologist to know that DNA programs that, right?
I think I've said this before. 1,000 years from now, right? If the bones of Ketanji Brown Jackson are found, and nobody and whoever the people or the alien overlords are on the planet 1,000 years from now that see that set of skeletal remains, right?
Right.
They're not going to have any idea what law school she went to. They're not going to have any idea what thoughts were going through her brain at the time, because that was soft tissue. Brain matter. They're not going to know any of what she stood for initially. All they're going to see is a set of skeletal remains. What is the very first thing that, upon observation of those skeletal remains, what's the very first thing they will be able to do to be able to rule it down at least in half as to trying to identify those remains?
That she was an indeterminate person of sex.
Because,
no, I'm sorry. No. They're going to...
Right.
No, it's going to be very determinate, because they're going to look at the DNA.
Well, they're going to look at the DNA, and they're going to look at the bone structure, right? The shape of the hip versus the upper end of the femur, and how the femur integrated with the hip, and the length of the femur. There is 2 distinct sets of skeletal remains, right?
Right.
The bone structure of a male femur going into the hip joint looks different and acts different than it does in a female, because of the purpose of a female and the purpose of a male, right? The reproductive purpose. The bone structure, the bones are shaped differently, right?
Right.
So you are going to be able to tell. You may not know a thing about her background, but you're going to know that, okay, I am at least looking at a female skeletal remain, and that's your starting point. And then you go from there. You start looking at DNA. You look at everything. It is empirical data that is scientific. You cannot deny it. I mean, you can, but you're an idiot. You're a fool.
You know, at this point in time, Duane, if I had a real producer for this show, we'd be spooling up Billy Joel's "She's Always an Indeterminate Sex Person to Me." But
and again, going back to the political thing,
BGs are standing by with more than an indeterminate indeterminate sex person.
But going back to the purpose of the Republicans here, by going down this road, what the Republicans have dumbed into here is the American people are looking at this going, okay, she may be qualified. She's going to go in the court. I understand all that. But the Republicans are making Democrats take a vote here that they don't necessarily want to take now. And they're going to have to. They're going to have to toe the line because they're not going to go against their own president and his first Supreme Court pick.
No. We got to move on. You mentioned three things that she stumbled on. And to me, this is actually the most basic one, because it's basically just a flat out denial that there's any such thing as truth. And especially in terms of biological sex, on which a lot of federal law is based, right? The Violence Against Women Act, which Biden was just bragging about renewing the previous week. Title IX, Title VII, Title VI, all those things are based on biological gender. And there's more in women-owned business concessions in government contracting. I mean, if you can't define a woman, none of this stuff is going to work. And so, I mean, to me, this was the most basic failure of Jackson. What were the other couple things that you wanted to mention before we move on to Ukraine?
She had an exchange with Josh Hawley about some child predator cases in which she eased the sentencing, much to the chagrin of the prosecution, up to 10 different times. And in one of the occasions, she said that, look, this one defendant that you're talking about, he was 18 years old. He just graduated from high school. And some of his victims, some of his people he was getting, child porn images on his computer, they were close to his own age. They were older teens. And Josh Hawley says, some of them were 8.
Yeah.
How do you call them peers? How do you call? He says, I have a 7-year-old kid myself. How is it that you have an 18-year-old looking at an 8-year-old in a sexual way and call them a peer and give them a lighter sentence? She says, well, some of them were older. Okay, so what is this, the bell curve? You take the youngest and the oldest and you throw those kids out and you average the other kids in the middle, and if they're of a certain median age, that's how you dole out the sentence? That really didn't come across very well, Ed Morrissey.
No. And what was the third?
The third one was in an exchange with Tom Cotton, where Tom Cotton was talking about her sentencing of a self-described fentanyl kingpin. He was dealing heroin laced with fentanyl, right? And he says, so when you gave out this light sentence, I know you talked to the family of the fentanyl dealer, the kingpin. Did you deal with any of the any families of the victims of this guy? And she said there were no victims. It was a victimless crime.
Yeah.
And he says, "Excuse me?" She said, "Well, it was a drug bust. There were no material victims in this case." And Tom Cotton pauses for a second. He says, "There's 100,000 people that die every year from fentanyl. What do you mean there's no victim? You're telling me that this guy dealing fentanyl, there were no victims to this guy's crimes? Really?"
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a good look, Ed.
No, but it is a Democratic look.
This is. But again,
it's going to kill them in the midterms, though.
It's going to kill them in the midterms because what you're doing is you are branding her and the Democrats by voting for her as being anti-parent, as being soft on crime, as being soft on schools trying to keep all this CRT and bizarre sex ed stuff out of class. It turns the midterms into the Virginia election. It Yunkinifies her nomination.
Yes,
it gives
does.
Republicans something easily to tee off on and say, well, KGB believes in this, and this, and Mark Kelly voted for her, and and Maggie Hassan voted for, and Cortez Masto voted for. You know, it's the campaign ads write themselves.
All right, we got to move on because we've got about a third of the of this podcast still left to go about Ukraine, and I do want to get to Ukraine because this is a very interesting story. You have this morning, you had Ukraine apparently attack the port of Berdyansk and sink a Russian supply ship, the Orsk, in the port.
Now this isn't exactly Crimea, right? This is actually
no. This is actually a Ukraine. This was previously a Ukrainian city,
right?
Right. This was their city. It was on the Sea of Azov, and the Russians have. This was very early. I think it was February 27th. Berdyansk fell to the Russians, and the reason why they wanted to seize it is they wanted to cut off the Ukrainians' access to the Sea of Azov, and a very clear strategic decision, which makes a lot of sense if you're going to invade Ukraine. You want to make sure that they can't resupply from the sea, at least at that point. The Ukrainians kind of flipped that script today and sank one of their major resupply ships, the Orsk, which they had just, RT had just got done profiling in Moscow, right? Just 2 days ago. They had a primetime thing about the Orsk and how it was bringing in men and materiel for the, the Russians, special military operation against the Nazis in Ukraine.
So this is classic. This is, the classic analogy is, if you've got a dog that's chasing down a car, that dog might chase that car, but if that dog catches a car, what are you going to do with it next?
Right. Yeah, that's always been my my question about this.
Russia's not going to be able to hold this, and it's not even just there. There is actual military ground counteroffensives that are going on too
up around Kyiv, and that's Richard Engel, NBC's Richard Engel was reporting on that yesterday. The issue with the key point with Berdyansk was that was their Russians' resupply point for their siege on Mariupol, which is the linchpin to that strategy that I just mentioned.
Right.
Once they take Mariupol,
that's going to hurt.
Yeah, and they're already having problems supplying that siege in Mariupol. If they can't use that port, it's going to make it a lot more difficult to get the necessary men and material into place. And the Ukrainians are trying to crank up some counteroffensives. And in service to that, this is sort of setting up Zelensky's speech to NATO this morning. And I know you guys were on the air while this was going on. I know you were also covering it because I could see Hugh tweeting about it. But Zelensky has dropped his demand, apparently, for a no-fly zone. Didn't mention it in today's speech to NATO, which is an interesting development all its own, because it's very clear that NATO wasn't going to do that.
Well, and I think Zelensky knew it, even when he was talking about it and asking for it in his trip around the Horn to the UK and Canada and the US. He was asking for it. He knew he wasn't going to get it. I mean, he's like, at least give us the planes. At least give us the ability so we can try to do no-fly zone ourselves. He had a contingency plan. He knew he wasn't going to get NATO to do that.
So today he asked NATO for 1% of its materiel. Planes, tanks, give me 1%. And he can defeat Russia, which, as I wrote shortly afterwards, that doesn't sound too boastful, considering what he's done with 0% of NATO's arsenal so far. Now, we've sent lethal aid. We haven't sent, as far as I know, we haven't sent tanks, and I know we haven't sent planes, because that was a big, huge issue over the last couple of weeks, where we promised to send planes, then kind of reneged on that. He still wants the planes. He's made that very clear. He wants larger weapon systems, though. He wants the S-300s,
which we should give him, by the way.
Which we should give him. He wants tanks,
because that stops high altitude Russian bombers.
It does, and that's what's happening in Mariupol. They need it to defend Mariupol. So, does NATO actually respond to this, Duane? Because look, I mean, one of the things that they're worrying about right now is escalation, because it's pretty clear that Vladimir Putin's getting desperate. He had people quit. He had his special envoy to climate change. I want to talk about Anatoly Chubais in just a moment, but he's getting desperate, and in that desperation, he might want to expand the war to NATO as a way to get a sort of a full mobilization from the Russian people by claiming that Russia proper is now under attack.
If he does try to attack a NATO country and draw everybody into it and play total martyr, again, I don't see how I don't see how the oligarchs are going to ultimately go along with that. I mean, at some point, he's just going to disappear, and nobody's going to. He's going to go Jimmy Hoffa. They're going to have to look for him in the end zone in the Meadowlands.
Or whatever the Russian equivalent is,
or the Russian equivalent thereof, right? I can't imagine that Russian oligarchs want to take on NATO. I just can't. That's not good for anybody's business, right?
Right. I mean, I agree. We have to ask ourselves, though, is Putin still acting rationally? I don't necessarily think he's acting irrationally now. He's been setting up this war in Ukraine for years. Did you see the clip of, I forget the guy's name, Nazranov? I think he's a commentator in Russia 10 months ago, almost eerily predicted everything so far that's happening in Ukraine. He said, this is what they're going to do. They're going to declare this a great patriotic war. They're going to send the troops in. They're going to get annihilated.
Right. He not only said all that, that this is all going to happen, but he said it was going to be an unmitigated disaster. Right.
So, in those circumstances, does he pull out chemical weapons? Does he pull out tactical nukes? NATO's saying if either one of those things happen, it's going to provoke a serious response. Nobody's saying red line yet, but they are warning that any such use will constitute an escalation that will get a serious response.
Well, you see, that's the thing. Joe Biden has hasn't he kind of already scouted out both sides of that? Didn't he already say the response would be severe if he did use a chemical weapon? And then a day or two later, he just tried to warn people saying, it looks like he may use a chemical weapon, and kind of shrugged his shoulders like, well, I'm not sure what we're going to do about it. Hasn't Biden kind of staked out both sides of that red line?
Well, yeah. I mean, and tactically speaking, politically speaking, I mean, I think that's probably, not necessarily, I'm not sure that I would call it unwise. I'll just put it that way. Tactically speaking, some ambiguity here might be worth having. This was
so if he drops a chem weapon in Mariupol because he can't resupply it now.
Yeah.
And so he starts doing chem weapons there.
Yeah, there's going to have to be a response. NATO is going to have to respond.
I was going to say, how do you think Boris Johnson's going to react to that?
I think he's going to say we need to target the units that drop those chemical weapons and annihilate them.
Well, but now if you do that, that's a direct NATO response.
It is a direct NATO response. There's actually a really interesting piece in The Guardian today too that I was reading, and taking into account The Guardian.
Yeah, go ahead.
But what they're saying is if you have a limited reaction, it allows Putin to have a limited counter reaction. In other words, you don't send NATO charging pell-mell across the border of Ukraine at that point. You do a limited strike on whatever units were responsible for that chemical weapons attack or the tactical nuclear attack, and then sit back and see what Putin does in response to that.
Yeah,
make him responsible for any further escalations. Basically, is what the argument is.
That actually may end up being the least worst option.
Yeah, I think so too.
There's not a lot of good options here, but it may be.
There are no good options here.
Right.
I mean, there are no good options here. And I think what happened in the West is that they were so convinced of the Russian military might that they just figured that there's no way that the Ukrainians would be able to hold out more than a few days, and so any action on our part would be futile.
Right.
Well, clearly that's no longer the case, right? I mean, the Ukrainians have demonstrated that they're pretty damn good at what they're doing here, and that the Russians are pretty damn bad.
And if we just put the thumb on the scale a smidge, we could maybe topple and take Russia off the map for a decade now.
Or at least the military. At least their military threat. Their conventional military threat, I think, is already exposed as vapor anyway.
And again, as far as trying to give Putin an off-ramp, trying to give him a way to de-escalate and claim some face-saving move and get out, I really don't know how that is actually part of the equation now, because did you see who's actually starting to do military training and exercises with NATO?
No.
Finland and Sweden are
we've been talking about Finland and Sweden for a while. I mean, they have yet to formally join NATO, but they're getting awfully close to it.
They sure are, aren't they? You think Russia could actually pull away from this in any degree, seeing Finland and Sweden now join NATO and say, "Yep, that was a really smart move. We accomplished everything we wanted here."
Yeah, no, I think that this is backfire for Putin.
Yeah.
I think it's backfire all down the line for Putin. Because Finland shares a fairly long border with
sure
Russia.
Does, doesn't it?
And St. Petersburg is right across the way from it. So
sure is.
Yeah.
So if his, and again, you got to go back. I mean, Putin's lied his way all the way through this. I never bought the premise to begin with. But what was the premise of why Putin did this? What was the existential need for Putin to take the steps that he took in Ukraine? What was the premise?
To defend Russians against Nazis.
Well, okay, that was one stupid thing.
That was Putin's.
But his premise was it's an existential threat. We cannot stand Ukraine joining NATO and having a NATO country on our border, even though they already have NATO countries on their border in Estonia and Latvia, right?
Well, that was the reason why Zelensky's saying they're next.
Right.
If you let this happen, they're next.
Right.
Yeah. So, yep. All right. One last thing. Getting back to our previous thing, this was just coming across the wire as we were talking about it. British leader Boris Johnson has waded into the transgender debate, telling Parliament that the basic facts of biology remain overwhelmingly important in distinguishing men from women. I mean, this is almost as saying, it's really important to distinguish that there's, 2 atoms of hydrogen and 1 atom of oxygen in water.
Look.
If you're distinguishing men from women, it's all about biology. Ketanji Brown Jackson even said so. It's about the biology. You have to be a biologist to understand the difference between men and women.
I'm still trying to wake up from this 2-year-long masking vax horror show that was the pandemic, in which if you push back at all at the nonsense coming out of the pie hole of Anthony Fauci or Rochelle Walensky, and you questioned what they were doing and what they were advising and the edicts that were coming down, if you question that, you were questioning science itself, right?
The science.
Right. The science was settled. The science says you have to mask kids because the science.
Simple science says, put your masks on your face. Put your masks on your face. Simple science says.
So for 2 years, we have been browbeat into submission on this pandemic, because if you don't go along with it, you're being a science denier, right?
Yeah.
And that's coming off of a decade and a half of Al Goreism and John Kerryism with regards to climate. If we don't do something about climate change, if we don't quit burning fossil fuels, if we don't quit all this other coal burning and carbon energy production, if we don't get off of all this, we're all going to die. All the animals are going to die. All the ice is going to melt. We're going to lose all this stuff's going to happen, right?
Right.
And if you disagree with that, you are denying what?
Science.
Because the science says all that.
Science.
Right?
We're
so
anti-science.
So the left has been just taking a sledgehammer to us, saying if you you can't even have a different opinion. You can't even question anything we're saying. It doesn't matter whether there's holes in it. It doesn't matter whether it can withstand actual scientific scrutiny. If you question it, you are a science denier. You're denying climate. You're denying science itself.
Right.
Now, tell me again about the science when we're talking about Leah Thomas in the pool.
Yeah.
Tell me again about science when
the biology is he's a man swimming against women in the pool. He's not a women's swimming champion. He's a man who swam against women in their championship.
Right.
Match.
Tell me again about Rachel Levine being the woman of the year.
Babylon Bee's woman of the year.
Okay. So tell me again how if we recognize what science has said for the entire existence of humans on this planet, tell me again how there's 35 different genders. How is that scientifically evident anywhere?
There's no science for that. By the way, and we really got to wrap up here, but you mentioned climate science here. And Anatoly Chubais, who defected, I mean, I don't think there's any other word for it, who defected yesterday,
right?
Was Vladimir Putin's point man on climate change, right? This is the guy who's negotiating with John Kerry. And
he was his John Kerry, right?
Do you think Anatoly Chubais has anything to say about Russian propaganda co-opting climate science? Because I'm really curious about what Anatoly Chubais has to say about that and about China's influence on climate science and the UN's efforts on climate science.
Exactly.
I am very curious about that indeed, but we'll have to let that go for another podcast because we're out of time here. What's coming up I'm coming up tonight.
You are. We didn't do one last night because I had to umpire a Little League game, so we are delaying that till today. This is the home and home show. I do your show, then you do my show. So we will see what comes out of the final day of hearings. This is no longer questioning directly of Ketanji Brown Jackson. This is the expert witnesses. This is the after show of the Senate confirmation process that takes place today. We'll see if there's anything that comes out of that. I doubt there will be much, but we'll see what kind of things percolate in the news. It's going to be interesting to see over the next days and weeks if it comes down to it's a 50-50 split with Kamala Harris coming in and doing time passages.
Time passages. All right, Duane, and what's coming up on tomorrow's Hugh Hewitt show?
Tomorrow's show is actually quite busy. Lindsey Graham will be on to react to this week's events. Sonny Bunch will be on. We'll do a conversation with Larry Arnn about what's going on in Europe as well. There's all sorts of stuff ahead.
All right, so that's tomorrow morning.
Matt Foldy of the Free Beacon will be on. By the way,
there you go. Good guess. All right. That's tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. Eastern Time, 5 a.m. on the in God's time zone, 3 a.m. on the left coast. Tonight's after show in the universe starts at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And so tune in for that as well. Duane Generalissimo Patterson, thank you very much. Don't forget, we're not going to be on my show next week because I'm on vacation. But
you're going to be out here.
I will be out there, and I might.
We still need to hook up and see if we're going to break bread together.
We got to do it. We don't get too many opportunities for that. So yeah, we're definitely going to do. We're going to definitely do something along those lines, Duane. All right. Stay tuned for more from the Ed Morrissey Show. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Ed Morrissey Show. It's my pleasure now to introduce Michael Doran from the Hudson Institute, hudson.org. His commentary appears at Tablet. It appears at the Wall Street Journal. He's on Twitter as well, and it's at Duranimated, I believe, is your Twitter handle, right, Michael?
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
So at Duranimated, and before we even get to the topic today, which is going to be Iran and Russia and the U.S., we first have to talk about a very important topic, the painting that's behind Michael on the screen, because he told me a great story about this. First off, for people who don't recognize him, who's in the painting, and why is he wearing a tropical shirt?
Oh, that's David Ben Gurion, and there he is, right there. And he's the founder of Israel.
He is the founder of Israel, yeah.
And he's a hero of mine. But there's an Israeli artist that draws pictures of historical figures, mainly Israeli, but he does Abraham Lincoln and some others and depicts them as hipsters. So this is David Ben Gurion as a retiree on Miami Beach.
That's just awesome. I saw that when we first connected up, and I said we gotta throw that into the podcast because that's just fun. All right, Michael, to the serious stuff now. We're seeing what looks to be a completely insane foreign policy here from the Biden administration. Now, you've actually fleshed out some of the in great detail at Tablet and at the Wall Street Journal as to what the dynamics and interests are of the Biden administration, Vladimir Putin, Xi Jinping, regarding Iran, the Iran deal, and the region. And going through the things that you've written about this, I sense there's at least it's not a rational reason for what the Biden team is pursuing, but I understand why there is at least what it is that they think they're accomplishing here. What is it that they think they're accomplishing by cutting this deal with Iran?
Well, you can analyze it a lot of different ways. What they say they're doing is stabilizing the Middle East. What they say is that our allies, the Israelis and the Saudis, have been forcing us into maximalist positions against the Iranians that won't work. And they look at Trump's maximum pressure policy and say it didn't work. It didn't work. Of course, they did everything they could to scuttle it before, so right. They never wanted to do it. But they think that if we try to kind of find an accommodation with the Iranians and bring them into the security architecture of the Middle East, show them that we don't want to topple them. If we reach out our hand in friendship, a kinder, gentler Iran will emerge. I think this is going to fail and fail spectacularly.
Well, I think it's going to fail and fail spectacularly because I think in the first instance, the Biden administration doesn't understand the non-rational, I don't want to say irrational, but the non-rational motivations for the Iranian mullahs to pursue the policies that they pursue. This is a radical extreme sect of Shia Islam, which is entirely apocalyptic. And that's the policies that they're pursuing are basically in pursuit of an apocalypse. Because they think they're going to come out on the right end of an apocalypse. It's not that it's irrational; it's just that it's non-rational. And I don't think anybody in the United States really grasps this, or at least anybody in this administration, I should say.
I have a slightly different take than you on it. I don't think it's really. I think there's religion and radical religion in the mix there.
Okay.
But when these guys make foreign policy, I'm talking about the leaders in Tehran. They're pretty hard-headed realists, okay. But their goal is to drive the United States out of the Middle East. That's their number one goal, and they want to start by driving us out of the Persian Gulf. They want to be the dominant power in the Persian Gulf, and then from there they want to drive us out of the Middle East. They want to annihilate Israel. They're, for a power that's really a declining power, and I think Iran is, it doesn't look like that because we're building it up. The weird thing about the United States is, especially under the Democrats, we are letting them borrow our power and build them up so that they can tear us down together with the Chinese and the Russians.
Which is what we're going to get to in just a second. But there's also another layer to this, right? Which is the Sunni Shia conflict in that region. And they want to push us out. They want to push Israel out. No doubt about that. The death to America, death to Israel chance. But what they also want to do is they want to exert dominance over the entire Muslim world. And
they see themselves as the lead. The Ayatollah Khamenei thinks that he is the leader of the entire Islamic world. That's true.
Right. So, and this becomes important when we start talking about the Saudis. We'll talk about the Saudis in a moment, but let's talk about Russia and China here. Right now, the Biden administration is pursuing what you've written to be as the realignment policy. And again, this is at Tablet. These are very detailed essays that Michael Doran has written. I'm going to have links when we actually do our live chat, so you guys can see this. But you can go to Tablet Magazine and read this. And the Great Realignment is this sort of oddly realist policy that seeks to extricate the United States to a large extent from the region, almost sort of giving the Iranians what they want, which is us out of the way. And this is something that Barack Obama really pushed. And all the same threads are there, you argue, in these pieces, as during the Obama administration when they were first pursuing the JCPOA.
Yeah, I wrote that together with a friend of mine, Tony Madran, about, 6-8 months ago. And we were trying to say to some of our friends who were saying that that Biden was not going to be a repeat of Obama on the Middle East, that no, in fact, this is the third term of Obama. I think the peace stands up pretty well now that we've got this Iran deal about to come down. And they didn't negotiate. They keep getting accused by people who want to ascribe good intentions to them of being bad negotiators, but they're not bad negotiators. This is a fire sale. They're giving it all away. They're giving Iran what it wants. It is. I mean, I don't mean this as a statement of criticism. It's an appeasement policy. They believe that Iran is an appeasable power, and that if we give it what it wants, basically, then we can come to an agreement with it. And that will mean that we don't have to use our military force anymore. We can just kind of, through diplomacy, stabilize the Middle East.
And this is where it starts to get a little incoherent, right? Especially right at the moment. Maybe in 2015, I would arguably say not even in 2015. After the invasion of Georgia in 2008, nobody should have been looking to Vladimir Putin as an interlocutor for adherence to international law. But 2014, he also sends proxy militias into Donbass, the Donetsk, Luhansk, and seizes Crimea. The very next year, of course, and this is more with Europe, Obama is signing off on the JCPOA. Now, I don't remember Russia being tremendously involved in this, but I do remember that the Iranians were sort of looking to Moscow or aligning more with Moscow at that time. Now we have the Russians at the table. Mikhail Ulyanov bragging to reporters about 2 weeks ago that he'd made a great deal for Iran, at the same time that we're warning that Vladimir Putin might be using chemical weapons or tactical nuclear weapons in Ukraine. I mean, that makes no sense at all to have them at the table as some sort of guarantor of Iranian compliance. It doesn't make sense, although it's a tell in the sense that what the Biden administration thinks it's doing in Ukraine is not what it's making us believe it's doing. What I mean to say is, the rhetoric of the Biden administration now is that almost like Cold War rhetoric against Putin. But all along there has been this restraint on the part of the Biden administration with respect to Ukraine. I mean, we did not deter Putin. No. Putin's doing very badly in Ukraine because he made some terrible miscalculations, and his army was ill prepared for the mission that it was given, and the Ukrainians were well trained enough and dedicated enough to be able to exploit those weaknesses. But that's not a success of American policy. It's America benefits from it, but we didn't do it. And we kept setting red lines for ourselves. And the reason for that is that
Biden wants to cut a deal with Putin. That's not what a lot of Biden's critics are saying, but that's what he wants. And the tell is, of course, with the nuclear deal, because Ned Price, the spokesman of the State Department, went out a couple of weeks ago from the podium. He said Putin is the pariah and Russia is a pariah, and we're going to negotiate the Iran deal with him. So
right,
clearly, this partner pariah. I mean, which is it? And the other tell is the way they have turned to the Chinese time and time again to work with the Chinese on Crimea. Not that they've gotten any benefit out of that either, but it shows you, these little episodes show you how they're thinking about world order and America's place in it. They're thinking about a concert system with the United States, Russia, and China stabilizing the globe together with the Europeans, stabilizing the globe. Yes, there will be points of friction between us, like Ukraine, but we're gonna teach Putin through the sanctions that we put on him that this is not the way to get what he wants. You remember when Putin went together with the Iranians in Syria, Obama said, "Oh, you're in a quagmire, and it won't work. This use of force like this, it won't work. It's gonna backfire on you," because they truly believe, they don't want to say it because they know it sounds naive to people like me and you, but they truly believe that the world has moved beyond power politics in some way, and that those who engage in power politics are gonna have their fingers burned. And so it's just a matter of teaching Vladimir that these bully ways of his are gonna be self-defeating.
Well, yes, and clearly that's been terribly effective so far in American policy. So now I want to bring this around now to the Saudis, because I was making this point, and this is kind of how we connected on Twitter a bit, which is that the Saudis now have decided that they are looking to better deal the U.S., right? I mean, the Saudis went through the Obama years where Obama was courting Iran at their expense. Then they went through the Trump years, and whatever anybody wants to think about Trump, it was pretty good years for the Saudis because Trump was much more oriented towards the Sunni nations, tried to rally them together with Israel to stand off against Iran, which is a natural way to do power politics, if you want to talk about power politics in the region for us, because most of those nations have been friendly to us in one form or another. Now it looks like Biden's selling the Saudis out. Came talking about pariah. He came in promising to make the Saudis pariahs over the Khashoggi murder.
And they didn't like it.
Go figure. Go figure. Well, and then
they didn't.
Go ahead.
I mean, what are they? I mean, he seems to have expected. He came in and he announced, "I'm going to make MBS a pariah," more or less. I mean, those were not his words, but clearly that was the intention. And they seem to have expected MBS to say, "Thank you, sir. Can I have another?" It's amazing.
Well,
really amazing.
And then the Biden administration, as sort of an aside here, but it's related, but it's a little bit of an aside. Biden decides that he's going to go try to get the Saudis to boost production to help him out, so that it can lower gas prices at the pumps, and Democrats won't get blamed for inflation. And the Saudis won't even take his call at this point. They're that frustrated. And not that I'm gloating about this, maybe just a little bit, but
a little bit, yeah.
Maybe just a little bit, Michael. Just between you and me and the people who are watching this, maybe just a little bit. But I mean, this is a bad situation.
We're bemused. We're bemused by the ideas that our betters in our society have about the way the world works.
Okay? Yes, there you go. That's a better way of putting it, and I'm going to remember that formulation in the future. But then the Saudis are not content to just not take Joe Biden's desperation phone calls. They're actually looking now to negotiate with China. And this has been going on for some time, but the Saudis had been reluctant to follow through on this. They're going to start doing sales in Chinese currency, yuan, rather than dollars, which is the way that the Saudis have always sold their oil, which is a bit of a cage rattler when it comes to the dollar as a reserve currency. So the Saudis are making it clear that they're going to push back against the dollar's supremacy in there if Biden continues to pursue a pro-Shia policy in the region. That is another consequence of this.
Yeah, there's been, in addition to what you just mentioned, the Saudis are also now building military drones with the Chinese in Saudi Arabia. They're building ballistic missiles with the Chinese in Saudi Arabia. The Chinese are helping them with their nuclear program, which because the JCPOA was the starting gun for a nuclear arms race, the exact opposite of what they said about it. The Emiratis are in the same situation with the Saudis with regard to Iran. They're building drones with the Chinese. They're now buying Chinese fighter jets. They're as disturbed by U.S. policy. The Emirates have been hit by Iranian ballistic missiles about 3 times in the last 2 months, I think. Of course, they were launched by the Houthis out of Yemen. But the United States, which is their patron, when they've been hit by these attacks, has, number one, identified the Houthis as the perpetrator, not the Iranians. So giving the Iranians a pass. Right. And then secondly, said to the Emiratis, "Oh, well, they have the Americans have criticized the attacks. You know, they've said they're horrible, and they've said to the Emiratis, we support you and we're here for you, but we're just giving them a hug and emotional encouragement. We're not doing anything. What they need us to do is to actually deter the Iranians, something that they can't do on their own. And so we've made our allies, the Saudis, the Emiratis, and others, kind of defense orphans. They have, they can't deter the Iranians. We won't do it, so they're starting to go to China.
Well, and this kind of gets into the final phase of what I wanted to talk to you about, because you've written so thoughtfully about this. This is, I think, a clear example of what happens when, Pax Americana vacates a region. Right? I mean, and I'm not necessarily a guy who likes the idea of America being a global policeman. In fact, I don't like it at all. However, there are worse options here, and what we're going to see in the Middle East are some of the worst options. You're going to be leaving a vacuum there, almost by design. And again, I would highly recommend that you go read Michael Doran's tablet magazine articles, especially about the realignment and what the purpose of the realignment is from the Obama administration as well as the Biden administration, what that purpose is. The purpose is to get us out of that region, essentially, except for just doing some trade. And that leaves a vacuum. And what happens in a vacuum is not that smaller powers just simply learn to, sing Aquarius and hold hands together around the campfire. What happens is other larger powers will come in and try to fill that vacuum. And that's precisely what Russia and China are doing in the open now, openly doing it.
Yeah, openly doing it now. Maybe you could say 2 things if we have time.
Plenty of time. Go ahead.
Well, first of all, there are, so let's just say, you say you don't want America to be the policeman. And I think that a good argument could be made. I think I have actually made it, that there's pretty much an imperative, coming from a domestic political imperative to pull back from the Middle East somewhat. I think every president, no matter who he is the last 4 have felt it. I think you can show it pretty clearly, and including George W. Bush, whom I worked for. I think there's the George W. Bush, the first term and the second term are 2 totally different people with regard to the Middle East. Mm-hmm. And so there are 2 ways you can do this. One is you pull back and then you put more responsibility on the allies,
right?
Who are a disparate group. They don't get along well. They have incompatible capabilities and so on. So we're the glue between them. We assign roles and missions, and we come in and we fill in the areas where they're inadequate. And that's the idea that Trump was arriving at. It wasn't perfectly executed with Trump, but Trump created the space where that could happen. The Obama idea is we turn our, the Obama and Biden idea is that we turn our enemies into our partners. And our enemies are our enemies for a reason. They want to destroy us. So it's not simply that we're leaving a vacuum. I mean, if our attitude was, we're going to get out, okay, Israel, you go take care, do whatever you want, that's fine. We're actually restraining Israel and we're building up Iran. So we don't have to do it that way. We don't have to let Iran borrow our power to destroy us. That's the craziness. That's the one point I wanted to make, and the other one just quickly is that this is woke foreign policy. This is progressive foreign policy, and being progressive, it means it's also domestic politics. And I think that explains why. It's a kind of a closed system. You see the way they work on energy policy now. The woke energy policy of the United States and of Europe turned Germany into a dependency of Russia, right? And the whole idea was that the economic interaction was going to soften the Russian agenda, but Vladimir Putin still believes in power politics, so he can turn his economy into a tool of geopolitics. But what's the answer now when they look at this? Well, we have to have more green energy because this fossil fuel dependency that Germany has on Russia, that's the problem. So we just have to get rid of fossil fuels. So when you live in a woke world, all of the answers to the problems that wokeism creates have to be woke, right? So
right.
It's a totally closed system. And so in domestic politics, the beautiful thing about this, about these ideas on foreign policy that the Biden team have, that it's the Israelis and the Saudis who are forcing us into conflict with Iran. And if we just reach out our hand to them, we can soften their agenda and find common space with them and so on. What it does is it turns all these characters, the Israelis, the Bibi Netanyahu, Mohammed bin Salman in Saudi Arabia, the evangelical Christians in the United States, the Zionist Jews in the United States, the security-minded Republicans, right? So this cast of characters, whom the progressives hate anyway, it turns them into the party of war. Remember, Obama said about the JCPOA, it's war or the JCPOA. So there's the party of war, and then that conception, it doesn't turn the Iranians into the peace party, but it turns them into the object of diplomacy. Because remember, we Democrats, we progressives, we're the believers in soft power, because soft power is smart and hard power is dumb. And we are going to show these stupid, dumb, thuggish Republicans that there's a smart, soft way to get what we want. And so as domestic politics, it's a winning message, especially when you're messaging to progressives. And when everything goes wrong, right, and there's war in the Middle East created by these woke policies, they'll turn around and say, look, those damn Israelis, or it'll be more in sorrow than in anger. Those Israelis, they just won't learn. They just won't learn. We tried to tell them, but they won't learn.
Oh, we heard that constantly in the Obama administration, constantly, especially about Benjamin Netanyahu, right? Well, you just can't tell him anything. He still, it was almost, I would say the analog to that, Michael, was Obama's response to Mitt Romney, that notorious response in that notorious debate. Oh, the 80s called, they want their foreign policy back. No, reality's calling. And the world
right.
does not work the way you're saying it works, pal.
That's it. No, they truly believe, this is the thing, they truly believe that we have progressed beyond the era of power politics. Yeah. And because we're in this globalized world now, networked world. If you look, here's the proof, Ed. You can see the proof right before your eyes. I mean, how can you be so condescending? How can you be so blind? Look at what the international sanctions have done to Putin. He doesn't have Prada in Moscow anymore. He doesn't have Gucci, There's actually he is suffering economically.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we have really, he's in bad shape. There's no doubt about it. But they can look at what we've done to his economy, and they can say we don't have to use these hard power tools anymore. Don't have to use them anymore. Except the problem is he's still flattening Ukrainian cities, right? So until if we don't deter, maybe we can use these soft power tools, or these these new the tools that a globalized economy has given us to deter these guys, but it has to be in combination with traditional power political tools.
Indeed. I'd look at that, but I'm still looking at the portrait of David Ben-Gurion on the wall behind you, Michael. I mean, I can't see anything past that. That's just awesome. Michael Doran, by the way, again, you can find him on Twitter at Duranimated. He's at the Hudson Institute, which is hudson.org. And of course, Tablet Magazine and Wall Street Journal. Michael, thanks so much for joining us. We got to do this again. I had a blast.
Anytime. Yeah, I really appreciate it. It's a lot of fun. And I'm such a fan of your site. Just an intelligent, thoughtful, independent voice. Kind of what you used to think we had in America everywhere. But
well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm maybe I'm a throwback. I don't know. But that sounds great. Michael, thank you so much. We'll come back with more.